Poor Bailey.
Oh, one eye chance. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Vale of White Horse Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Catherine Foxhall and I'll be chairing this meeting. All voting members of the committee are here in person as required. Councillor Debbie Hallett is online with us, and we have officers both in the room and joining us remotely. So thank you for everybody's coming. Normally we would live stream these meetings on YouTube, but for technical reasons this evening we're not doing that, but we will be recording it and uploading it to our YouTube channel directly. So if people who are joining us online could keep your microphones muted while not speaking, that would be really helpful. Please do raise your virtual hand if you'd like to speak, and those of us here on the table will keep an eye out. For those of us who are in the room, the evacuation procedure in the event of an emergency is to evacuate through the nearest exit, which is into the corridor, round to the right, and follow the signs. Please assemble in the car park at assembly point 9. If anybody needs a break, there's water in the foyer and a toilet as well. You're very welcome to use it. We've got one substantial item this evening. Normally we have a break between big items, but I hope we'll just probably run straight through this evening. Please keep mobile phones silent or off, and committee members, unless your phones are away, you have your meeting papers, please don't use them during the meeting. And then at the end of the meeting, we'll confirm that the recording has ended, and do please remember to sign out on the sheet as you leave. We have got some speakers with us this evening. You're very welcome and thank you for joining us. Just a reminder that this is a meeting in public rather than a public meeting, so that we ask members of the public don't shout out or kind of interject during discussions. But when those of you registered to speak, you'll be invited to speak at the appropriate time, and it may well be that during the discussion we have questions for you, and certainly I'll invite committee members to ask questions of clarification after you've spoken, but we're really looking forward to hearing you speak. So to get on with the agenda formally, chair's announcements. Just quickly, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Nick Bennett to our meeting. He is our new head of legal and monitoring officer, and I hope he'll become a familiar face in our meetings. Nick's been in post only a couple of weeks, but he's already begun to work on looking at the recommendations that we received earlier in the year from the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny peer review report. And the plan is to set up a small task and finish group to look at those recommendations. There was 20 recommendations, to look at those in more detail with the 3 chairs from the 3 scrutiny committees. Oh, hello Nick, you're joining us from outer space. Lovely. The 3 committees across the Vale. So yes, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining us this evening, Nick. Right, to move to item 2, which is attendance and apologies for absence. And we've got all members of the committee here. As I said, we've got Councillor Debbie Hallett online. We have apologies from
just from Councillor Oliver Forder.
Okay, and Councillor Forder wasn't able to persuade her.
So he lived join us.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Do we want to, for the benefit of our guests, introduce the rest of the members of the committee?
If you wish, yes. Yeah. So we've got Councillor James Cox, Councillor Ron Batstow, Councillor Eric Dillahart, we've got Councillor Judy Roberts there in the corner, and we've got Councillor Hayley Gascoigne and Councillor Robert Madison here with us. And you, of course, Councillor Catherine Foxhall.
Yeah, and we've got Adriana Partridge here, who's one of our deputy CEOs, and our scrutiny lead, and
Candida Basilio, who is our Democratic Services Officer. So our crack team here this evening, and other members will introduce Tom and Candida minutes. Right, next item, minutes of the last meeting, item 3. Committee members, are you happy that we adopt and sign as a correct record the scrutiny minutes from the meeting held on the 2nd of October 2024? Budget,
Agreed.
that kind of stuff. Yeah. Happy?
That's okay.
I think that was a nod from everybody. Thank you very much. I will sign those later before we leave. Item 4, declaration of interests. Please could any committee members let us know if they have any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests, non-registrable interests, or any conflicts of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. Oh, brilliant.
I sometimes make use of Oxford Rugby Club's facilities, so that would be it.
I think we can probably all assume most of us customers and club members and various, we all represent different wards represented in this report as well. So yes, thank you James, that's helpful to know. We all bring different expertise and interests. Nick, did you want to?
I was just here if you wanted any support on that. I mean, the rule is the individual more affected than a regular member of the public, and using a facility like that is not a declarable interest. It's sensible to keep your to mention such things occasionally, but there's no legal restriction, so you can participate, vote, etc., etc. Sorry, Chair. I will try and keep out of it, honestly.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you, Nick. That's really useful to know. Okay, urgent business. I do not have any urgent business, and I need to mention this evening. So item 6, public participation. So we have 3 registered speakers for our meeting this evening. We have 15 minutes allocated for this section as a whole. So each of our speakers this evening has 3 minutes to speak, which is pretty standard. But we may also ask questions of clarification as well. So I would like to invite, first of all, we've got 1 speaker in the room and 2 speakers online. So if I could invite Councillor Chris McCarthy, please, from Grove Parish Council to, if you want to sit at the table and address us, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. Hopefully you've got a list of the questions, which I believe we'll get a written response to. Is that correct? Or
Yes, I've just spoken to officers today and this evening, and I've been working up a draft response. And once they've heard the discussion this evening and what you've got to say, yes, you will get a written response within the next couple of weeks.
okay. The key things I'd like to raise then is about the last report we had in 2015. The current report say that Grove do need some training facilities, because at the moment we've got thousands, and I mean literally thousands of people trying to share one training space, which is 60 metres by 60 metres. The council put it out of bounds at a weekend because it needs some recovery time, but we literally have Grove Rugby Club have adult ladies, 3 adult teams plus a veterans team, all trying to use that space, and they get 2 nights a week with a half share on another. Sorry, they get 1 night a week on their own and 2 half shares. They also then have 8 youth teams and 3 girls teams trying to share that space. There is an adult football team trying to share the space. Well, they are sharing the space when it's available. And the football clubs that use the space, they have 13 teams at the moment?
16 teams.
16 teams at the moment. See, when I say thousands, I mean there's over 1,000 people trying to share that 60 metre by 60 metre space, which, with the weather we've had, the last year or two has been passable in previous years, it's been out of bounds from early to mid-November right through till the end of January because it's just sodden and unusable. And that's, the parish don't own that piece of land. It's belongs to private individual who let us use it, along with the only land that the parish own is the recreation ground in front of the rugby club and the football club. The bit behind, the training pitch at the side and the pitches adjacent are all privately owned and leased out under. So again, there's restrictions on all of them, and none of the clubs are happy with the amount of playing area they have. But that's, you know, and we're growing. What we're saying is, it has been identified 3G pitch would be good. So why is the money not being spent on that? Why are they saying wait till the end of 2042 when it will definitely be needed? Because we all know if we wait to 2042 to start planning for this, it'll be another 10 years before it happens, and that's way too late for growth. Is it fair on what was circulated, hopefully to all of the councillors a while back? A bit more detail. £1.7 million in S106 contributions.
30 seconds, Councillor McCall.
All right. And 0% of that from the reports is due to be spent in Grove. And we really, I know there's an area it covers, but is that great? Why have the Vale of Whitehorse ignored the comments about our concerns, the lack of contact? There's three different companies done the investigation, and none of them have come to Grove sports clubs or the parish council and discussed it with us.
I am going to have to stop you there, I'm afraid.
Okay,
Councillor Bradley. We do have your questions, and we will get back to you with a written response. All the committee members, and we heard you in full council as well, and I know we all wrote lots of notes then as well. So yes, we will come back to your comments during the discussion this evening. So thank you ever so much for bringing your concerns to us this evening.
Can we ask points of clarification?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you for coming to speak at our committee today. So can I just check that I hear what you're saying, but in terms of the report that we're looking at today, the strategy report, is what you're saying that the strategy doesn't include sufficient provision for what you'd like to see. It's missing.
Two things about the report, if I may. One is it doesn't include sufficient. It doesn't include anything for Grove.
Okay.
And secondly, the fact that we were not consulted. And most of the sports clubs, we've contacted them, and they said they were not contacted either. And that's our biggest concern, is that, you know, you've spent a lot of money on these these individuals coming to write your report. And we do understand that we're a tiny part of this overall strategy for the Vale. But we weren't contacted, and we've said time and time again we haven't been contacted and asked that it's looked into, and our concern is we didn't get any responses to the request.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or clarification from committee members? No. All right, thank you ever so much. I move now to our second speaker this evening. Our Councillor Lorna Barrett, Chair of Botley and Hinksey Parish Council. Are you with us? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Hello, Councillor Barrett. Thank you ever so much. I believe you're here to speak to us around the Harcourt Hill campus.
Yes, two items, Harcourt Hill and the Louis Memorial Fields in Botley.
Correct. All right. Your 3 minute starts, please go.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, I'm here as Chair of Botley and North Hinksey Parish Council. I want to request that the leisure strategy is updated to reflect the reality of the current situation and to request support for replacing lost facilities and improving those that we have for our community. The two areas I need to bring to your attention are Brooks Harcourt Hill campus and the Louis Memorial Fields. So first of all, the Oxford Brooks facility at Harcourt Hill included a swimming pool, a gym, sports fields and exercise classes, all of which are available for community use. In April's consultation on your strategy, we requested acknowledgement of the risk of loss of those facilities because we knew that Brooks planned to exit that site in 2025. In June, that risk became stark reality when Brooks announced the early closure of the swimming pool, and that has now closed. So that's a huge loss for the community. We recently presented the Vale with a petition to save the swimming pool with nearly 2,000 signatures, and this was unanimously approved at Council to go forward to your Cabinet to see how it can be progressed. The leisure strategy lists the pool as in place with an active swim school and as part of adequate provision for swimming pools in the district. So that's no longer true. It needs to be updated. The pool's now closed. And surely that would indicate the Vale is not adequately provided for. 11 primary schools from around the area have had to find alternative pools for September to continue their lessons. Local people have lost the swim school for children. The GP's practice can no longer use it for referrals that they were doing. And a key centre of wellbeing and social support for all ages has now been lost. So local people feel let down, they feel disempowered, and they feel at the mercy of decisions made by Brooks and the landowners. And we fear that this might be the start of the loss of all of those sports facilities. So we'd like the Vale to include in the leisure strategy that they will provide a swimming pool and continued leisure facilities in Botley, either by reopening that pool that's closed or adding a new pool, and to work with relevant stakeholders to protect the ongoing provision of the sports facilities at Harcourt Hill. The second area is the Louis Memorial Playing Fields, which includes the pavilion, a skate park that's just started to be built, and a mugger. Botley and North Hinksey Parish Council have planning permission for a new pavilion. The existing one's long been identified as inadequate, dated and unfit for purpose. And we're in the process of fundraising. And we think the leisure strategy should reflect the fact that the Vale has supported this. You've earmarked 250,000 of CIL money towards a replacement pavilion. And mention of that in the strategy would significantly help us in our applications for funding. Currently, you say protect the existing pavilion. We don't want that. We're building a new one. So that new pavilion and the skate park will help fill a much needed gap for youth provision in Botley, which is sadly lacking. And also the new Westway development at the bottom of the hill is being completed next month with 150 new flats, 1, 2 and 3 bedroom flats. So demand for facilities in Botley is only going to increase. The Vale has not funded leisure facilities in this area for many years. Having a provision included in this leisure strategy is very important to bring Botley in line with facilities enjoyed elsewhere in the Vale. We fed into the consultation in April, but those points were not covered and included. So this is my other opportunity now, the only other opportunity we have now to try to get this voice heard in the strategy and to get that updated. I'm done.
Excellent. Thank you ever so much, Councillor Berwick. Could I just ask a question of clarification? You said right at the end there that your response to the consultation in April wasn't covered. Are you saying, did you make the same points in April in the consultation response as you've just made to us this evening?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. So the main thing that's not been included is that Brooks, the potential loss of the Brooks facility, which is not really acknowledged. And obviously since April, they've closed a swimming pool, which actually we didn't know in April. We knew it was under threat for September 25 is when they're due to exit the site. But in June, they brought forward the closure of the swimming pool. So that's an addition that needs to be added in to say that that pool is no longer available. And it's being counted in your list of swimming pools for the whole district.
Okay, thank you ever so much. So yes, that's very helpful. Are there any other questions and clarification for Councillor Berwick? No, okay. Well, thank you ever so much, Councillor Berwick. And yes, I hope you'll hear us discuss this during the meeting this evening. I hope. Thank you ever so much for your time and for joining us this evening. Our third speaker then is Councillor Emily Smith. Emily, are you online?
I am. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes,
Brilliant.
we can. Thank you. Nice to see you. Thank you, Emily, for joining us this evening. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Brilliant. And yeah, some of what I say will sound familiar because you've heard some of it already from Councillor Barrett. So during the public consultation, I also raised several omissions to the draft strategy, and some have been addressed in this version, but some haven't. So the skate park in Botley and the pavilion project are now mentioned, for which I'm grateful. However, the information about these projects is incomplete. On page 45 of the leisure strategy document, in the table of priorities, the information about the skate park is already out of date, and it lists Botley as being an SODC. Paragraph 1216 should make clear that the Botley skate park is fully funded and construction is already underway. Also in the priorities table, the information about the pavilion is unhelpful. As Councillor Barrett said, the community don't want to protect and enhance the existing pavilion. There's planning permission to replace the pavilion, and us as a council have earmarked funding towards this. Documents like this are key to demonstrating to potential funders that the district is fully behind this particular project, but currently the wording in this document is confusing at best and at worst could be a hindrance to funding bids being successful. As you've also heard, inexplicably, despite this document being dated September, there's still no reference to the closure of Harcourt Hill swimming pool, which happened in June, and nothing about Brooks's plans to leave the site. So our gym, 3D pitch, playing pitches, park run, open space, all of this is at risk. So why doesn't the strategy even mention this situation? Its omission means that there's no assessment of how the closure of the pool has impacted the need for additional swimming facilities across the district. What's the plan to find funding to renovate the pool or provide a new pool at the northeast end of the district? And how will other sports facilities be protected when Brooks leave? The strategy is an evidence base for the joint local plan. So surely it has to stand up to scrutiny when it's looked at by the planning inspector. So we need to make sure that at least it's factually correct. And ideally setting out a strategy for ensuring that everyone in the Vale, including the 10,000 people for whom Botley is their local service centre, can access leisure provision. I realise there's a time pressure to get this done before the joint local plan is submitted, and as I understand it, Scrutiny Committee has an opportunity this evening to help ensure that this document's valid. So some of the questions I suggest the committee might want to explore are: why isn't the closure of Harcourt Hill swimming pool and the likely closure of other facilities not addressed in these strategies? And how will this significant loss of provision be addressed, if not through the leisure facility strategy? Why hasn't there been any contact between the consultants pulling the report together and local elected representatives at various levels? We could have given accurate information if there had been. How can we be involved now in helping correct the errors before this strategy goes to Cabinet? And are the strategies in line with our corporate plan and emerging joint local plan as well? So on behalf of people living in Northern Vale who are looking to this council for help, I ask that the committee fully explore the significant omissions that Councillor Barrett and I have raised and ensure that they're addressed before Cabinet has to sign these important strategies off. Thank you.
Excellent timing. Thank you, Councillor Smith, very much for your questions and for your comments. And yes, we've been writing furiously here, and I will make sure, we'll all make sure that your questions are addressed this evening. And we have our Cabinet member in the room. Thank you ever so much for all our speakers. It's always great to have residents, because if Scrutiny can't support residents' concerns, then really who can? So let me move on now to item 7 on our agenda, which is the work schedule. Oh, sorry, Councillor Madsen. Yes. Do we have any questions of clarification for Councillor Smith?
Yes, thank you, Chair. You mentioned, Emily, just there about making sure the strategy is in line with the Vale's corporate plan. I was wondering if you had anything in mind when you mentioned that. Is there anything in the plan that you're concerned is not congruent with the corporate plan that you would like to mention?
Yeah, thank you. Yes. So basically, one of the things that that kept jumping out at me, and I put this into my consultation response as well, was that when the strategy talks about how accessible facilities are, it talks about whether you can drive there in 20 minutes. And this is kind of skewing the situation, I think, in terms of assessing where the facilities need to be and whether they are accessible. So, for example, in Botley now, if If I want to go swimming, I can drive to Abingdon in 20 minutes. If my son wants to go to Abingdon swimming, he can't drive, he's too young, so he has to catch 2 buses and that will take 90 minutes each way. If I drive to Wantage, it will take me 40 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. But for my son to get the bus there, it would take less than an hour. So those distances are different. Sorry, the times that it takes to get to facilities from this end of the Vale vary depending on whether you're getting a car or a bus. But also, surely everything that we're about in our plans and our corporate plans and our joint local plan is encouraging active travel. So why are we basing a strategy around how easy it is to get to by car? That's the I did raise this in the consultation, and I did have a bit of back and forth with officers about it, but it just still doesn't feel right to me. So that was the main thing that was jumping out. And thinking about how our leisure facilities are accessed by public transport, what are the active travel and public transport routes that are available, and sort of making sure that they tie in with each other. Yeah, I just don't understand why it's all based around car travel.
Thank you. That's very helpful to know. Are there any other questions or clarification, Councillor Smith? Apologies, Emily, for jumping the gun there, and thank you, Robert, for pulling me back on that. Right, I will move now to our work schedule, if that's okay. So we all have a works programme on our desks. This is being updated a lot. So we've been working on filling out more of the purpose column in this work programme to understand more, so that everybody understands more about what we're doing, including officers and ourselves. But also I should say that because we now have Nick Bennett in post, and we will be working on a task and finish group, this work programme is likely to be one of the focuses of our work, so it's likely to be changes coming up. And of course, the committee, please feel empowered to let me know and to let Nick know what we think should be on this work programme and what we want to look at. So at the moment, and certainly these items will be coming to us, corporate plan on the 28th of January, and we have the Beacon update report before the 28th of January. Do we have another meeting scheduled in December? Or
January is January, the next one.
So it is the January meeting, okay. Yes. So is there any questions or comments on the work programme as it is at the moment?
And just why does it say before the 28th of January on the Beacon update report?
I think that might just be a little typo.
Okay.
Because there was a meeting on the 28th, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I just start? Is this also available as like a live document, and will it be sort of updated as things go through council and through cabinet?
This is just a draft I've done, and I will probably publish it later this week so that it'll be online. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so yes, it is regularly updated, and we do get notifications every time it's updated.
Yes.
So yeah, it is a constantly moving document, and as I say, feel free to let me know if there's things you want on it or off it. And we should have ownership of this document.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's got three basic items on the non-dated things about housing.
Yeah.
106 housing delivery, council-owned housing provision. I know they're all slightly different, but is there any way we can combine those into one meeting, because they would definitely involve the same people. They kind of all interlink.
Yeah.
And so I would find it quite difficult to just talk about one without bringing the other two things in. So I'm nodding fiercely.
Yeah. So I've been discussing with Councillor Call, who is actually on the call this evening. I have been emailing with Councillor Call and with Suzanne Malcolm, who's our officer in charge of this, because we as a committee have felt quite strongly that we wanted to discuss council-owned housing provision. Councillor Call has let me know that the majority of the questions that we have asked are actually going to be contained within that housing delivery strategy item. So those will probably get bundled into one. And yes, I think it does make sense. The Section 106 Affordable Housing Grant Funding application process is the programme, the policy programme that we looked at last year, and this is an update. So it would make a lot of sense for those items to come together, and I hope that we can arrange for those all to be in the same bumper housing meeting.
Yes, because clearly the grant application process should be in line with the delivery strategy.
Yes, thank you. So yes, those 3 items can probably certainly come down to 2, and hopefully we'll address them all in the same meeting. Hayley.
Yeah, so there's an item on here, financial relationships with tenants, which I think is something that arose from our last meeting. So I was wondering if you had like an approximate date for that. Just it feels quite like it's of its time now, isn't it? People are asking about it now and they're being asked for money now. So it wouldn't make any sense to do that like in 6 months' time, maybe. So do you have any kind of timetable on that?
We don't have a timetable yet on it. I've heard from Councillor Porter and from Judy as well. And was it you that?
There was one in my head actually.
Yeah. So I think it's certainly for the committee. I think for the 4 of us who've kind of raised this, to get those examples together.
Okay.
And I think we can. Yeah. So we can follow that with officers fairly swiftly, and certainly it's on my list of things to come into when I'm talking with Nick Bennett now. There's a number of examples of things that I'd like to look at, or we would like to look at, and I think having fresh eyes on how we can approach that and how that we can take control of that item in our work programme is going to be very useful. So yes, absolutely. I take your point about the urgency of that. Thank you. Any other comments on the work programme?
Except I can't find the modalities. We've got community assets on our outstanding, and the financial relationship with tenants will probably fit into our community assets as well as our housing.
Yeah.
So those I think are the 2 tenants, our 2 biggest tenants, aren't they? Or property will be a plant.
Yeah.
But I would have put those are the biggest tenants that we've got.
Okay. So are you suggesting we could probably remove community assets as an item because it's contained within that?
We picked up on a particular item that we would like feedback on, but that community assets has been on there for a long while, kind of requesting a strategy or an overall way in which we handle these facilities. And otherwise, what happened that we know about is that it all happens scattergun, and it's not happening in all of a piece in an organised way.
Okay. So yes, I think it's up to us. The onus is on us to be really clear then about what we do want to discuss under that item. We want to go Okay. Yes. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. All right. Any comments, Adriana? On that? No? Okay. Thank you so much. Yes, so that is a constant work in progress. Constantly changing. Right. Work schedule. So let's move now to our main item of this evening, item 8, which is the leisure facilities and playing pitch strategy. I am delighted to welcome to the room our good friend of Scrutiny, Councillor Andy Fulsham, who's the Cabinet Member responsible for this item. I did say to Andy earlier that we should give him a little coffee shop loyalty card. He gets a little stamp every time he comes to see us. And we also have Tom Rice with us, who's our Principal Planning Policy Officer for the Council, and the author of this report, I understand. Do we have our colleague Carmela on the call this evening? Yes, we do. So Carmela also joins us. She's the Leisure Development Officer, and she's also been heavily involved in this report. So thank you both for all your work on this. This is a big report, as people have commented. Councillor Fulsham, would you like to introduce it for us?
Thanks, Chair. It is always a pleasure to come to this committee, and thank you for the offer of a loyalty card. I will, I'm sure, be back in January. Introducing the leisure facilities assessment strategy and playing pitch strategy for 2023 to 2041. These strategies are the result of a joint commission between ourselves and South Oxfordshire to appoint consultants Stuart Todd Associates. This was back in autumn 2022 to prepare both these strategies. It was a joint commission, but separate studies have been developed for each district. Both strategies are, I must emphasise, a high-level snapshot in time of the key sports and leisure needs of the district, being developed in line with recognised Sport England's guidance and methodology. Form a key part of the evidence base for the joint local plan and provide a strategic framework to direct funds for enhancing existing or building new facilities. Key terms for both strategies is that they outline the need to protect or enhance existing facilities or provide new facilities, and relevant references to those terms will be found throughout the reports. To be clear, set the ambition and direction of travel that do not provide an acceptance that it will undertake every action mentioned within it. That will require further and more detailed works during the strategy period. There's been a series of engagement and consultation with a wide range of stakeholders from their inception to develop the versions before you today, including comprehensive audits of existing sports and leisure facilities, contacting and visiting sports clubs, facility and pitch operators, a technical steering group including council officers, local, regional and national sports bodies such as Sport England. The Joint Local Plan Steering Group have reviewed several iterations of the strategy as it's been developed. And the public consultation between March and April earlier this year, with over 140 respondents from a variety of sources, including sports clubs, sports participants, developers, parish councils, just as an example. And the consultation responses are all set out in Appendix 4 of the report pack with you tonight. And the report outlines a recommended amendments to the strategies. Post-adoption, which is the recommendation that we was made to Cabinet, strategies will move to their delivery stage, where there will be regular monitoring, evaluation and progress reviews of the action plan and support delivery of the recommendations contained. I have members of the policy team along with me today, both in the room and online, who will be here to assist members with any queries or points of clarification they may have in regard to the reports. Of course, I'll try and answer as many questions as you wish.
Thank you very much. Can I start by asking if you have any responses directly to our speakers, our public speakers that we've had this evening?
Yes.
Any comments you wanted to make before we get into it?
Before we get into it, I would like to go back to comments from Councillor Smith and Councillor Barrett from North Hinksey about the changes post the reports being presented in the spring. As I've just mentioned, but you may have sort of not spotted it in the whistle stop overview, this was very much a report at a point in time. And so at that point in time, the Harcourt Hill swimming pool was open, and also the Louis Memorial Pavilion was in its old state, and there was an ambition there to see it. Protected means that there should still be a facility there, and enhanced means improved. Yes, this has been by redeveloping the pavilion. Yes, obviously everything has moved on, but you can't actually keep on updating a report to say, well, we've come to this stage because this facility is closed or that facility is opened. What we can do, and I've just checked with officers, we can provide a written update of, in the interim between this report's writing and the point at which the decision is made, these changes have come about to help inform the Cabinet decision, and I'm sure that would be available. We could use that sort of report.
Thank you, Councillor Poultry. Yes, we I think given the comments from Councillor Smith, Councillor Berwick in regards to in regards to the Louis Memorial Pavilion and the references to protecting and enhancing, while the plans are actually for the sort of demolition and rebuilding of that facility. We could clarify that in the report before it goes to cabinet, just as sort of an asterisk to say that by protect and enhance, we recognise the plans that have come forward from the parish council for the pavilion there. So that is fine for us to do. Access a minor point of clarification, won't affect the strategies at all. In terms of the Harcourt Hill pool closure, as Councillor Smith said, that the consultation version did not include reference to closure of the pool. It hadn't been confirmed at that point in time, or it was on the horizon, but the later version, which is before you today, does reference Brooks' intention to redevelop Harcourt Hill and says that the swimming pool provision will need to be retained in spite of any renovation works that take place at Oxford Brooks. So the strategy is very much reflective of that, but again, we could be more explicit with the most recent position in terms of where Brooks are at. So again, when we talk about redevelopment, we can just cross-reference the fact that Brooks has closed the pool from September of this year.
If I can expand on this, I did actually have to do a bit of a deeper dive into the best way of ensuring swimming provision up in Botley, and I was assured that actually keeping reference to the pool within the leisure facilities strategy was key, because otherwise developers could say, well, it's not in your strategy, there's no need for us to provide anything like that. So keeping it there is key, albeit with a clarification. It has since the report was written, it is closed, but keeping the pool there shows that it is needed, and developers would have to reach a pretty high bar of saying we've proved that it's no longer needed. So that is actually the key to maintaining provision.
Okay, thank you very much. So as we've all seen, yeah, this is a long report. I propose that we go through it fairly logically, in a logical order, in order that we cover everything. And I think it's really important as a committee that we're all representing different wards. We've all got different interests in particular sports or facilities, but it's really important that we kind of keep a district wide, ensure we're representing all residents in the district, as well as discussing the major issues that we've heard this evening already. So I propose that we start with questions to officers regarding the context of the accompanying report which precedes the two strategies, and before we get into the individual, first the leisure facilities report and then the playing pitch strategy. Does that make sense? So committee members, do you have any questions to cabinet member and officers regarding the accompanying report that comes with this, whether that's the process, responses to consultation, etc.? Councillor Delahunt.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the options that are open to us now. We can accept the report or not accept it, in which case, what are the risks?
Thank you. My understanding is that Scrutiny has been asked to consider the report and make the recommendations to Cabinet for Cabinet's decision towards the end of the month. So we're here to take on board your comments, your questions, your requests for clarification, and it's then for a Cabinet decision. So that's the process side of things.
Can I just clarify? You say you made reference a few times to, this is a snapshot in time and all the rest of it. But the report does make recommendations going up to 2041. Is that right? My sort of, and I tried to find this in the report, but I was unsuccessful. So if you can sort of guide me, I appreciate it. I'm very conscious that in my patch, my ward is growing in population and it's diversifying in terms of its demographics every year. And the needs that we have today what I would think it's unlikely to be reflected in 2041. So I was wondering how much of that sort of, obviously you don't have a crystal ball, you can't look into the future, but I understand these things are modelled and there are, we do know over the next 10 years sort of roughly where the population's going, how much of that has been sort of fed into the report?
Thank you, Councillor Cox. That is actually a very perceptive and germane question, and that is why this report has come to us at this point, because it is a key part of the evidence base for joint local plan, which of course runs all the way through to 2041. And part of that is projections for population growth and the allocation of strategic sites for where majority of housing development will take place over the next 15, 16 years. And the report actually builds in all the population growth that is anticipated in the locations that are specified by projections through where the strategic sites are, where we're expecting infill development, and how it's spread between the population centres. It's key for that. And it's, as I just mentioned, it's a mathematical data-driven model. And that actually refers back to a comment from Councillor Smith about a 20-minute drive being standard. Actually, I'd love us not to have to use a 20-minute drive as a standard, because we're all about active travel. We're all about integrated transport and bus services and so on. We want it to be that, but actually it's the national standard. It's what Sport England is set as. This is how to divvy up, develop provision of sports facilities within a district. And this is actually a strategy to show what Sport England, but also not just Sport England, the national governing bodies of like Football Association, Lawn Tennis Association, all the different national sporting bodies would say, for a district of your size, growing in this particular way, we would expect this level of sport provision by the end of your 16-year period. That's what it's aiming for. So it's done on mathematical calculations rather than going down to sort of, well, is it in parish A or town B or suburb C? It's more down to what makes sense. Yes, it's then built up from what's currently there and where makes sense to build. Well, it starts with, it's a three-tier thing. It starts with what can we secure, which is quite often developing a legal agreement to say, we'll make sure that Sports Club Y can use facility Z so many hours at particular times over the next 10 years or more. So protect that, enhance it. Where a mugger is beginning to look very shabby and not really fit for purpose, how do we enhance it? How do we get it back up to standard? And then finally, the provision part comes along with new developments on major sites. So yes, it's a mathematical model, and it really does build on where we're expecting major population growth.
Thank you, Andy. Debbie Hallett online. Debbie.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Andy, for coming to present this tonight. And Tom, thank you for coming along. It's nice to see you again. I have a couple of comments, and one might be for Tom in particular. I noticed in my studies of this subject matter that in the summer, in July, the government wrote to all the local planning authorities to caution everyone against submitting a plan that was incomplete and not ready to be examined. And then I noticed the errors and gaps in this strategy document, which is to be evidence for our joint local plan. And I tried to imagine what could be fixed quickly. And some of those things, Tom, you mentioned just previously, not quite all of them, and which things were really not possible in the time that we have, such as the feelings of some parishes of being overlooked or left out of the consultations. There's not really very much we could do about that at this stage, except to learn for the future. And the other thing was the thing that Emily Smith mentioned about measurement in car miles or car mile minutes or something like that. I was noticing throughout all of the document that it was reiterating our main goal to encourage active travel and to get away from private car journeys. And it's throughout all of the documents. And yet there's nothing in there that talks about that at all. And that's one of those big sort of problems that I think there's probably not enough time to fix, which is unfortunate. But I do have, and it's probably for later, some recommendations about how we can fix the obvious errors so that the document can be moved forward and ready to go to the submission package, which I think is coming up in a couple of weeks' time. So I wondered, Tom, if you could say something about that warning from the government about not to submit plans that aren't ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hallett. Good to see you as well. In terms of that letter from the housing minister to the planning inspectorate, I can't be drawn too much on that here today because it's sort of a matter in relation to the local plan, but I understand the point you're trying to make. And if any of the other officers online do want to come in and correct me on anything I'd say about that letter, please do. But this strategy is part of the evidence base for the joint local plan. It has informed something called our infrastructure delivery plan, which is a live document that sits alongside the local plan and includes all the recommendations for infrastructure provision from the strategic sites in the local plan. So in the Vale of Whitehorse, that's the 3 sites that are in our current plans that don't have permission: Northwest Grove, Northwest of Valley Park, and the expanded allocation at Dalton Barracks. If through an update to this strategy, either through our action plan, which is the piece of work that follows this, or through a more fundamental review of the strategy, if members did feel that it was significantly flawed, I will add that that's not my view. It would only require an update to the infrastructure delivery plan, which is a live document and wouldn't cut to the fundamental core of the local plan itself. So in terms of members' concerns around this strategy, I don't see that it feeds into that concern from the housing minister written to PINS about incomplete plans being submitted to government. And I will reiterate that it's certainly officers' view that we haven't submitted an incomplete plan to the planning, or we're not proposing to submit an incomplete plan to the planning inspectorate when that comes around in mid-December.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I respect your knowledge and your expertise in that area. I have other questions that'll come later. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. I have Hayley next on my list.
So I think it draws a little bit on both what Councillor Hannah and Councillor Cox were saying about updating stuff, because I totally recognise that we have a good idea of the projection of the numbers of people that are going to live here. But I think the thing that changes more than that is just the idea around what leisure activities people take part in. So I think that's really the thing that needs to be updated over time. And so I think you kind of did maybe mention a mechanism for updating it. So that was just one point, but actually the my main question, a separate question, is around how this supports the joint local plan. Because obviously the joint local plan includes our district and another district, South Oxfordshire District Council, and this document that I'm looking at only covers Vale. And I guess I know this isn't about our individual patches, but the area I do represent is really surrounding Didcot. And so most of my residents, apart from those very local facilities in their villages, do look to Didcot for their leisure. And so I'm sort of surprised I'm not looking at a document that covers both districts. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about why we've arrived here.
Thank you, Councillor Guscott. I can shed a little bit of light on that. These strategies were very much developed on the same principles, in tandem with each other. And I've seen the chapter and verse of South Oxfordshire's strategies as well as the Vale strategies. They are done on exactly the same criteria, exactly the same provisions. And there was a lot of recognition that there's a lot of cross-border use of facilities not just around Didcot. There's Addington Gymnastics is actually based over in Berensfield. It's things like that. And actually, we've benefited tremendously from these studies studies underlying these strategies being developed together, because it meant that we could look at picture as a whole. So that's very much part of it. In terms of the ability to amend things as the sports landscape changes, I appreciate that, and there I think we're going to have to work with the officers delivering the action plan. But we did consult very closely with the national sporting bodies, because they have an idea of what's coming down the path, what's the up and coming sports. I mean, I had examples of sports that I didn't know much about when it came to stuff like parkour, which I was. I think I'd heard the word, but I had no concept of the actual sport. And I feel I know far more than I did at the start of this. I've seen this study and strategy evolve over the last year as I've been closely involved in it. So yeah, it can change. Strategies feed into the infrastructure delivery plan, which is the part that will flex if, say, a strategic site delivers more housing than we expect, or delivers it quicker than we're expecting, we can move forward later provision. Or if something delays the site being brought on and built, then that sporting provision can be delayed. So it's a living document. It's one that will change as the landscape changes, and that's what the officer team are there for doing in the implementation phase of this strategy.
Ron? I wonder, it may not be appropriate at the moment, but could we put some response to the Grove Parish Council public?
Certainly can. I'm aware that officers have offered a written response, but if it would help the committee, I'll do an overview of responses on the questions that were. It was very helpful to get them in writing in advance, and we're taking these very much as informing our response to the committee tonight. Starting with the comments about the old playbook strategy and the site at Mobley Way for a new 3G pitch. And I'm told that we are still looking at options at the Grove Airfield to consider if and how this can be delivered on the site. And if it is feasible, then we'll be talking to the developers about how to bring it forward. The second one, which is, if anything, more of a concern, is the suggestion that nothing of 1.7 million of Section 106 contributions generated in Grove are not actually being spent in Grove. Well, I've actually asked officers to go back and look in detail at the Section 106 agreements, and they came up with a total received in developments within Grove, excluding those that go to the county council, police, affordable housing, household waste and recycling, and street signage, and that comes to £4,850,000 and some. And there's a total of Section 106 funded agreements funded and approved from that total, £756,320, of which £460,180 and pence was specifically within Grove. Small sums to Wantage, 176,000, Challow, 28,000, and the freshwater habitats area, if you read parts of Grove, Garford and East Hannay, of 91,000. And there's a breakdown of a range of provisions funded by that, including improvements to muggers, sports pitch drainage, Grove RFC pavilion improvements, and sports pitch maintenance equivalent, and maintenance of an open space the land west of Bellinger's garage, and Grove RFC mobile floodlights, and various other things. So yeah, there is money being spent specifically in Grove. I know officers are going to come back with a full detail of contacts between the District Council and Grove Parish Council. I know that officers will give a full account of that. And the wider question of, do we actually abide by and support the Oxfordshire Council's Charter on Communications, Fairness and Respect? Well, yeah, we do. We voted that through unanimously, I believe, at full council several months ago. And there are commitments in our current corporate plan about working in an open and transparent manner. We're actually, this consultation process that this strategy has gone through is actually a clear example of that, because in Sport England's recommendation, they don't talk about taking this sort of strategy out for consultation. It's part of our commitment to transparency that we did so. And we've had a wide range of responses, and there's actually a large number of changes that have been made to the strategies as a result of that. At least 13 on the leisure facilities strategy, and I believe 11 on the playing fixtures strategy. So yeah, we certainly do believe in consultation on those things. Yes, we do outline within the report all the details of the changes. You can look at them line by line. Were there any other areas that you wanted me to address specifically on that, Councillor Batstone?
Not at the moment, I think, until getting to the details of the strategy.
Yeah, thank you. Judy, did you have a question on the kind of overall?
I did. I've got three. Two of which have come up by several people. And you have raised with how this is a document that will be used in 106 asks, and so that's really important. That's really my question comes back to active travel. I would have said one of the quickest ways you could fix that is to make sure there's something in here that says when a sports provision is to be provided, it should be placed near public transport facilities for general access. To have some kind of public transport, because when you're doing a large strategic housing site, there's usually some kind of road near it, and often bus facilities are provided along that road, not always, as we know, but on the whole, that's one of the 106 asks, to try and put in there that the leisure facility or the sporting facilities that might attract people from elsewhere should at least be put near those points of access, rather than just pepper potted anywhere within the document. So since it is used for 106 asks, I think there should be some kind of comment in there for that. I'm worried about updating. Clearly, when this went out to consultation, there didn't seem to be a system whereby the providers of sports and community facilities, you don't seem to have a network of being able to contact those people. So I really don't know how you'd be able to keep this document updated, because it does say in there that they would like to keep it updated. And clearly, as 106 asks come on board and things get built out, you don't need those anymore. And one of the problems we've had over the years is that all the original things that were in the IDP get asked for again because they haven't been taken off the list. So how can we get a system whereby our provision that's updated, and it would also cope with this landscape change of sports? I mean, the one I was involved in was squash. I used to play at 10 o'clock at night because I couldn't get a court any other time. Now, most of them are not even there, or if they are there, they're only 50% used. And my third thing that comes out of looking at the whole document is I'm slightly worried about how much of our provision is with third party, especially privately owned third party. And when you look at schools, I'm afraid most of these schools are either private schools or they're in trusts. That is, that they are completely privately owned. And if they wanted to pull out, and I know it says you wanted to secure CUAs, which is something I'm not used to seeing. But yes, I think if you don't manage to secure them and various private enterprises pull out, you could be quite short on leisure facilities at very short notice. So those are the 3 points I felt weren't covered by this document.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Roberts. I will try and answer those. You may all refer to officers for some clarification. In terms of transport, it's a little bit of chicken and egg situation. Obviously, this is one strand of the evidence base for joint local plan. The transport study is another part of that, and that again comes through it as a separate stream within the evidence base. And we expect them to mesh together quite nicely. We don't, I believe, put a specific ask for public transport stops attached to sports facilities, but we expect them to make sense of that within the transport strategy. Point on updating and changing. This study, as I said, it started with working through Sport England and national sporting bodies, which was actually an important first stage because they are the ones that know about local clubs. And we relied on them to say, okay, here's the contact details for Secretary of such and such parish cricket club, the bowls team that work that have a bowls green at St. Whatever's. And that was the key to getting a lot of the information. We then went out again to make further contact, and in part through the consultation, because, well, you may not have heard it, but look, you can still tell us about it. And that's what the amendments show, that people said, oh, don't forget there's a running track at Dalston Barracks, things like that. So we're keen to keep that up. And yeah, the officers are aware of that. And we want the IDP to be a living document that shows how stuff will be delivered through the years, not just, well, that's what we set back in 2024, 2025. It's changing through. You want to come in with anything extra on that?
Yes, if I can, Councillor Fortune, thank you. So if I just take each three of your questions in turn, Councillor Roberts. So the first point around the location of facilities and the encouragement for safe and active transport. So Section 8 of both the PPS and the leisure strategy include recommendations for decarbonisation, sustainable travel, active travel, etc. So there are some overarching principles that they draw upon, including from Sport England's guidance on those matters. But particularly what will be key for us in shaping new facilities will be policy HP2 of the emerging joint local plan, which includes design criteria and location criteria for new sports facilities. So that includes providing high quality, safe, active travel routes between the facility and surrounding area, including provision for cycle and scooter parking, and ensuring that they are accessible and inclusive for a range of users, including those who are disabled, and promote social inclusion. Furthermore, we do restrict development to what are the tier 1 to 4 settlements. So we seek to restrict new leisure provision in more dispersed areas. But obviously in a rural district, we've got that balance between rural communities needing access to facilities and the need to encourage that shift towards sustainable and active transport. So the strategy is trying to balance those potentially competing interests at times. Moving on to the second point in terms of the network of clubs, and how do we anticipate getting that updated information? I will start by saying that as part of this process, right at the start, we did survey and sent out survey requests to every single club in the district that was operating at the time that we knew about. And the list of clubs was put out as part of the consultation in the spring. So we did seek engagement from each of the clubs that was operating in our district, and it's true that not all of those responded, but consultants did send chaser emails up to those clubs that didn't respond, and they did also undertake site visits across the districts as well to sort of get a feel for the clubs and the facilities that we had in place. But the key mechanism for engagement is through the steering group, which has representatives from the national governing bodies and regional bodies. So they're much better at engaging with their clubs and getting an understanding of the issues that they're facing, because they're interacting with those clubs more often than we would. And for us to maintain that open, ongoing relationship with every single club in the district, I mean, across both districts, they'd be dealing with hundreds. So we use the NGBs and the regional bodies as a conduit to get that information and provide us with that sort of that interface between the clubs and ourselves on as part of the monitoring. But the study does also include recommendations for updating every 3 to 5 years. And as part of the next local plan, not that you might want to be thinking about that now, if we're looking at significantly higher levels of growth potentially, then we will also be having to commission a new study to look at that as well, in terms of if we are looking at further housing sites and significant levels of housing growth, then this process we'll probably have to go through a repetition of that as well. And finally, in terms of your point around reliance on private ownership and community use agreements, I do agree with you that we are to some extent hostage to what those private organisations want to do with those facilities, and we're seeing that Harcourt Hill at the moment. So I agree there are sensitivities around that, but ultimately leisure provision is a mix between public and private provision. And if we sought to meet all the needs of groups through public provision, then we are looking at a scenario where we might be running facilities that aren't commercially viable. So sort of the strategy acknowledges that some stuff is provided by private organisations and some stuff is run by facilities run and operated by the district council. So if they do close down, I do agree that it could be an issue. We will be looking at that and monitoring it through the action plan. If there's anything substantial in terms of a loss of facility or new population growth, then that's something we will pick up through a fundamental review of the strategy in line with the new local plan after the new local plan.
Thank you. And if I could add, specifically the provision of large new facilities or continued use facilities, secondary schools, because there the landowner is predominantly the county council, there is a high degree of reliance that they will continue to be providing those, whatever the government's model of those schools is, that leisure access. It makes financial sense in these constrained times that an expensive sports facility that is heavily used in the daytime by the school students is then available to the community in the evenings, because otherwise you don't get access to multiple sports courts in sports halls or outside pitches and the likes.
I'd just like to come back on that. There isn't a single secondary school in Oxfordshire that is owned or run by the county council. They are all run by academy trusts.
Yeah.
So when you say council owned, they're not. They are owned by trusts now.
Okay, but there's still an expectation of.
There has been a perception of that before. I don't think people quite realise exactly how much academies have taken over the school area and how little government influence there is in school facilities, which is, well, we'll have to see how the new government approaches things, but certainly that's how the 14-year-old governments approach things.
Right, time is cracking on. Have we got more questions, burning questions on the kind of overall approach, or should we move to the specific strategies? Let's move on. We can always come back if there are other questions that haven't been addressed by the time we get through. So let's start with leisure facilities. So let's start with the executive summary then, which is the paragraphs with EX in front of them. Ron, I believe you had some questions specifically regarding EX11. Has that already, and EX8, have they been answered already, or do you want to come back on those?
I think the EX11, perhaps you could briefly explain what stage E means, because I encountered it several times throughout the document, and on a search it was I think 20 odd times. And what does stage E mean in this process?
Are you happy for me to come in?
Please.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Bastow. So stage E is the action plan. So it's the delivery strategy that sort of the delivery plan that follows on from this strategy. So looking at where we've identified the need for certain facilities in this strategy, it's following up with, okay, how do we make that a reality on the ground when their provision isn't there, or if it's an enhanced recommendation, it's at those detailed stages of how we move from the strategy to implementation. And there'll be various factors that affect that action plan. Some things, for example, could be reliant on timing to spend Section 106 money secured from development. So they might be more of a priority because we've got to spend the money or return it to the developer. Other things will be around the trajectory for housing growth or population growth, where those facilities are needed sooner, or where they're needed to fill a backfill or a perceived deficit in leisure provision in an area. So stage E is that action plan following on from this.
So it's actually what we actually do, as opposed to the strategy. That's fine. Yes. I suppose my other question, it comes back to Grove. Are sports halls provided by schools really community facilities? I think we've already discussed this, but I mean, I was particularly worried that page 8 says that facilities should ensure facilities should be available as far as possible. And it seems to me that this is a bit weak, because we're really saying we're totally reliant on the schools, and in this case, most provision in Grove will be as part of the schools to cooperate, as it were.
Thank you. I take your point, and that actually goes back to one of the three key approaches, which is protect use. So it's creating and enforcing these legal agreements to say community groups, community access, or clubs access to a particular sports hall or logo or whatever will be secured for the next 10, 12, 15 years or whatever in a legal agreement. And that's what we're investing time and resource in, making sure that those agreements are in place to make sure that those facilities that wouldn't otherwise be available are made available.
So can I pick up on that? So are you saying then that we as a local authority have the power, because that's what wasn't clear to me, we have lots of wording, ensure that there's community use agreement. Do we as local authority, can we use this strategy? Do we have the power to make sure that those community use agreements happen?
We invest lots of time
retrospectively where there isn't one, because there was lots of examples where there isn't secure use, or proactively when new developments come on.
But certainly if we were using Section 106 money to facilitate a community use agreement, so in the case of Grove, we're saying we're using developer funding to secure the access to this sports hall, this mugger, this playing pitch, that would be something that we would enforce if it was closed, if it was removed from us. Yeah, we would be party to that agreement, because we're handing over Section 106 funds to secure access to that. So if the school at any point ever decided to withdraw from that agreement, I'll put my hand and say I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the details of the legal agreement that have been signed or will be signed. But I imagine there will be penalty clauses for violation of those terms. Mm-hmm. So yes, that is something that we would seek to enforce, because it's a transaction. We're providing money, but to secure a facility that is needed to mitigate the impact of development.
Yes, I think it comes back to another question, because Section 106 money is allocated to education and to leisure facilities? Are we saying that some of the Section 106 money which was allocated for leisure facilities will be invested in these sports halls, which should, I would have thought, would be part of the education allocation?
Nick has peeked in from outer space. Nick, would you like to bring your legal mind to this?
So I'm not. I'll start off by admitting I'm not a planning expert, nor am I very good at changing my background, as you've probably also spotted. What I can say is my background is litigation and enforcement. Just on the broad question of enforceability of Section 106 agreements, unfortunately, I've had to take action on behalf of other councils in the past where people haven't done as they should, and there are some very big sticks that your legal department can take for you. The first of those is injunction, where we can proceed to the courts and get an order, what's known as a mandamus, a compulsory order that someone must do something that they have promised to do in a statutory agreement of that kind, or in a contractual agreement really of that kind. The other one is that you also have powers to take direct action to do something in some occasions and recover the monies from the person or the company that's not fulfilled their promises, so that they get burdened in the same way. So without any more specialist planning advice to hand tonight, just to say it's very much is enforceable and it very much is protected. Okay, so I can get more detail provided if people wanted it, but fundamentally 106 agreements are very enforceable.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Can I just add a point there? Since the 106s are a legal agreement and will be going in front of you, the wording of them will have to be very clear, and the word provision will not have to be used, and the word community CUA in perpetuity will have to be written in instead. So what I'm saying is the legal agreement will have, the 106 agreement will have to have that in it. He's just changed his back.
Yeah. Okay. I think well, the specifics of legal agreement wording are probably not for us this evening.
But it's because yes, the standard one is provision, and that wouldn't cover it.
Okay. Thank you. Ron, did you have anything else you wanted to ask specifically before I move on to Debbie Hunt?
I just want, and this is to do with Section 106 agreement. Are we saying that the sports halls, which are recommended in this document, will be part of the Section 106 money for leisure, even though they're actually in schools? So I would have thought of part of education allocation.
Yeah,
I mean, the Section 106 agreements were made back in 2004, so I'm wondering whether they apply in this case.
I think the Grove Airfield, the consent was issued in 2017 for the outline. So I think the Section 106 was signed around 2017 for the Grove Airfield site. In terms of whether it falls into the leisure or education category, you're right, there probably is a slight bit of overlap in terms of facilities being used for both. But we do have to be very careful with, if it's identified for the funding of leisure, it can only be spent on the leisure elements of it and making it accessible and enhancing the provision that you might otherwise get for community use agreements. I see Nick's got his hand up, so I don't know. I don't want to talk myself into a legal problem here. So.
No, annoyingly, Chair, the speaker was doing the opposite, because he just said what I was going to say effectively. The only point I'd add really is that Scrutiny obviously is here about adding value, and you set that out in your introduction at the beginning. You do risk running down some blind alleyways, it seems to me, by getting into the detail of the planning and specifically the 106 agreements. I think all you can really get today is the broad principles are, where there are agreements in place, they are enforceable against the persons that were entered into them. Going forwards, they would be written and designed in a way that follows the legal principles to make them as enforceable as possible. Chair, I think you need to be careful. Is all I'm saying, that you're getting into some real detail here on technical issues, which would, on specific sites would need a lot more direct and experience than I think I or other officers are probably able to offer.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Point taken, very much so. I'm going to move on then to Debbie. Do you have a question that's not related to legal section?
No, I'm going to take it right back up to strategy again. And I've heard it mentioned a couple of times that this is a snapshot in time and it can't be a perfect representation. I do want to point out that the date on the strategy is September 2024. And from September 2024, the Harcourt Pool is closed and the Botley Skate Park is being built. And the pavilion has planning permission. So I wondered if committee will support me in recommending that we fix those errors in this draft before it goes for approval, so that when it is approved by cabinet and submitted as part of the evidence for our local plan, it is correct. I can give you a specific list of those later. I don't feel we need to use meeting time for all those corrections, the minutiae of that. But would committee support that? Thank you.
I'm seeing lots of nods, and yes, and certainly I think if a report is dated a certain date, then it should reflect the reality on the ground.
I think officers and I have already committed to producing a list of items that have changed since the report was written before it went out to consultation, up to the date of the report.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Would it be helpful for you if I send you and Tom a list of the things for the North Hinksey Botley corrections?
Feel free to. Yes, please do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think kind of together with the comments that Councillor Smith has made as well, that would be very helpful if you could send those through, yes, to Tom, and Tom is nodding. Yes, thank you,
Verbal
Tom.
confirmation, yes.
But yes, I think the general point, and we can come back to our discussion on our recommendations in a minute. But
do you want that from everybody?
I've got another one. Well, there were a number of comments that were received as part of the consultation that we have already incorporated. But if there is major changes that have happened, and the key one clearly is Botley, then we can incorporate those. But I'm not wanting to generate a huge amount of going back out for further updates from every area.
Sure. Is there more questions on leisure strategy? Okay, so I've got Eric and then Eric.
Thank you, Chair. I was wanting to talk specifically about swimming pools. Is that do you want to delay it till later?
No.
Yeah. So the report paints a picture of uncomfortably busy swimming pools. The word uncomfortable is quite stands out. But what really stands out for me is that there's a really good swimming pool that's not included in the report at all. And it was raised in the consultation, and the answer was, well, it's a Lido, and it's only open for 6 weeks. That doesn't. It's only open for 6 weeks because we failed to keep it open longer. And what's the difference between a Lido and a swimming pool? I don't understand why that swimming pool is not included in the report. I'm talking about Abbey Meadows.
Yeah. I can give a brief overview, and I'm sure Tom will come in with some further details. It was mentioned in the report. It wasn't considered at length in the report because you've already acknowledged it's open for a limited period of time. Even if that time was doubled, that would be less than a quarter of a year. And not many customers, I think, would be wanting to swim in it out of the broader summer season. And also, you've got to remember that out of the height of the summer season, bad weather is going to affect a lot of it. And people aren't likely to want to swim in times of wind, rain, and adverse weather. So it doesn't add noticeably to the swimming provision across the district. And if we were to taken into the calculations, that would suggest there was more swimming provision than there actually is regularly, and so it would be less requirement for any additional swimming facilities.
So if I could just come back to how you said with Harcourt, that if we didn't include a closed swimming pool in the report, then a developer could come in and say it wasn't mentioned. So if we don't include Abbey Meadows in the report, someone could build a hotel there.
Well, that land is clearly still allocated for leisure, which is the provision that we've made for Harcourt Hill as well, within the joint local plan. I'm able to fill in any other details about Abbey Meadows too.
I guess just to reinforce what Councillor Patrick said, which is that essentially we wouldn't want to rely on it as a core pillar of our swimming strategy on the basis that it's only open for a very small part of the year. It wouldn't prevent the council making decisions if it wanted to make improvements to the Lido to either expand its capacity, allow it to open for more time of the year. But in terms of this strategy, it's not something which we would want to say, yes, this is a key part of our swimming needs, on the basis of it just purely can't be that year-round facility at the moment. In fact, even if you had a heated outdoor pool, they can't open throughout the winter months, because even when they're heated, which might go against all the carbon reduction targets that we're looking to achieve, it can't be open full throughout the winter months from sort of October to April time. That doesn't mean that it's a fair game for development. It's still a leisure facility in our districts that provides a need, albeit a need that's only there for the summer period. If an applicant was to come along and say, I'd like to build over this, we would still resist it as a loss of a leisure facility, as with Sport England.
Okay.
So there's that nuance between the two. That provides you with an answer, Councillor Bill. Thank you.
As a thought about seasonality, if you're going to say that seasonal swimming pools can't be included, then you've also got to say that seasonal cricket pitches or seasonal rugby pitches. So I get your point, and I won't labour it, but I think there is a point actually that the seasonality of it is largely irrelevant, because then we can start picking apart any other sports where the cricket pitches only put their nets out for certain months of the year, or as we've already heard from Grove, their rugby pitch is also out of action for several months of the year because it's flooded or too wet. So yeah, sorry, that was Chair's selfishness there. Hayley, you have another question.
Who would I be at a leisure meeting if I didn't mention parkrun? Parkrun's a key aspect of my personality, and I'm going to bring it in here. It's not actually in the report. I did do a word search, and it actually specifically says parkrun is not in this report when I searched it. So for those who don't know, parkrun is a free community event that's put on by volunteers every week on a Saturday, 5k. People can run and walk. Or on a Sunday, it's 2k for juniors. I just did a quick search and used my local knowledge, and I think that in the Vale we have 3 adult or regular 5k park runs and 4 junior 2k park runs, which means approximately about 1,000 people in our district a week take part in these events, and I think that is significant in terms of activity in our communities. So I mean, I know we can't start picking apart and making changes now, but for me, it's a bit of a shame that that's not in there. But in terms of why I think that's important going forward, is that so these events are done at the grassroots, it is a group of people who want to put these things together, and I've spoken to people in our local community who want to bring these events about. And to be clear, when they do pop up, they attract more people. We're not just redistributing the people that are already doing them, they attract more people to them. So it is a net benefit in activity in our communities. And the problem is that when you want to set one of these events up, you need a suitable space for it. So this is comes back now. I bring it back to the strategy and so on, because when you're talking about a park run, you need a continuous 5K loop that doesn't cross over roads, because obviously we're talking about hundreds of people running or walking, and then when you're talking about a junior park run, it's only 2K, but there are additional risk assessments there because we're talking about children. So yeah, that's omitted from this report, and I think that is actually important when we're particularly talking about planning and building new houses and so on, is that there are spaces like this for events like this. It doesn't have to be parkrun, just places where there are continuous paths provide a place for people to take part in walking, cycling, running, and so on.
Thank you, Councillor Gascoigne. I wish I could say I have the same level of experience of parkrun as you have. I know you're an avid parkrunner. I did go along to Abingdon's own parkrun when I was Mayor of Abingdon, and was very happy to help with the celebration of a very significant anniversary there. The problem you isolate is actually quite a telling one. It's how you take into account a sport that doesn't actually require any specific built or set out facilities. And I welcome the comments. Equally, I've got friends who are involved in the cycling club. They cycle on the roads. We don't actually go around assessing the roads as to whether they're suitable for cycling. We work very hard to make sure they are a good environment for active travel, but we don't assess them as sporting environments. It's a fair point, but I wonder if some of you got any comments on parkrun and the non-facility related sports that are important to our residents.
Thank you. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Councillor, with the non-facility related element of why it's not specifically included in here. Is because it's a strategy looking at the physical infrastructure. Taking your point, Councillor Gascoigne, that the green spaces are also a key part of community infrastructure, and that is the basis upon which events like parkrun can be organised. In new developments, we have in the joint local plan green infrastructure standards that are manifest in the infrastructure delivery plan for the local plan, as well as within policies in the joint local plan. So they set out standards for amount of hectares per person to be provided, and that will, on the new developments, provide an opportunity for creating activities like that. This strategy wouldn't be the one to sort of recommend those more sort of or support the delivery of those community organisations to do that. That would perhaps be some of the work for our active communities team. I don't want to volunteer them for work, but essentially that it's sort of at an other side of the leisure provision in terms of working with community groups and supporting those groups who come forward with elements like this to make use of our existing infrastructure, such as the green infrastructure that's going to be in on the new developments.
Thank you.
I'm going to take Robert and then James, and then we're going to move to playing pigeons.
Thanks, Chair. I had quite a broad question about accessibility. The word accessibility comes up quite often in the report, usually in the context of access by foot, cycle, or by car or public transport. What doesn't seem to come up in any kind of specific way is accessibility in the sense of being accessible to those with different needs. I'm thinking of wheelchair users really when I say that. I'm sure there's other examples. Is there a reason that this is not really touched on in any detail in the report? Is it covered elsewhere? Is it what's that about?
I know it's an item that's very dear to my own heart, as it is, I know, to many of the committee members. I think that accessibility in terms of being available and accessible to all members of the community is really at the heart of all this work. I think it's a key consideration. I know it comes up quite regularly on the playing pitches side of things. Don't have any detailed stuff on the accessibility on leisure facilities, but I know there are national standards that buildings have to have disabled access, which isn't just wheelchair accessibility, but it's also for those with sensory needs and other hidden disabilities. So I know it's a key part of it, but I'm sure Tom has some further background on that.
Sorry, can I just bring in Nick? Nick, did you want to comment now?
I don't. Well, me or Tom, I think we've covered it from different angles. I'll just put my hand up that if you wanted some legal input on that I can do that to support you, Chair.
Okay, Tom, did you want to hop in then? And then Nick, if you wanted to add anything, you're very welcome.
Yes, so I think there's detailed design guidance from Sport England on accessibility standards, which new leisure facilities will be designed to in consultation with Sport England as a statutory stakeholder for provision of new leisure facilities. So sort of rather than being extremely repetitive of guidance that Sport England has and potentially locking that into a moment in time, relying on that evidence which can be updated externally as Sport England standards improve over time, will be something that we look at when we're considering planning applications for not just new leisure facilities, but improvements to existing facilities. Furthermore, I think I referenced it in the response to the 20-minute drive time question earlier in terms of the emerging joint local plan policy HP2. It requires that new sports facilities are accessible and inclusive for a range of users, including those who are disabled, and to promote social inclusion. So collectively, it's not something which is ignored or left to the wayside in terms of sport and leisure provision. It's very much a key part of Sport England guidance and our emerging joint local plan.
I did wonder if it might have been covered, outside the report, so to say, but yeah.
I will say that actually my response to the consultation was this document does not talk about providing for different needs, and it does not talk about women and girls. And actually, this iteration of the report is significantly improved. I would like to give credit for that, because I thought I was quite concerned about that in the previous consultation. So thank you for the work that has been done, as well as taking the point that probably perhaps we could see more. Nick, then, did you want to add any legal comment on that accessibility?
Just a few, if I may, Chair, with your great. Firstly, there's two statutory pieces of legislation that will run like golden threads through all of this. Firstly is Section 149 of the Equalities Act, which says that the council has to apply policies, and Tom's helpfully set out some of those that are relevant here with the detailed requirements of Sport England, but also the Health and Social Care Act 2012, Section 14Z2. That's the boring legal bit, sorry. And that does similar things there on accessibility requirements. So I do agree, having looked at the report, it is in there, it is touched on, but it's touched on lightly, and the detail of that, the heft of how it's delivered, is exactly as Tom's described. And just to say, there is some case law around this that says that relying upon those guides and relying upon that guidance and applying them consistently in the way that's been described, it is a legally compliant way to fulfil those duties. So I think members can be proud of themselves for raising that and thinking of their whole community. But there will be more meat behind the strategy that will deliver that, as well as what's being spelt out. Thank you for allowing me to interrupt, Chair.
Thank you, Nick. Very helpful. James, did you want to?
Yes, I just want a bit of clarity, if I may, on a couple of things that come up throughout the report. So the first is, obviously I was very drawn to the proposal of skate park in Kennington, but it was sort of attached is the phrase "explore the opportunity." I know that comes up a lot in the key actions to explore the opportunity. And then there's a time scale attached to that. and most of them are given sort of short and medium because they're priorities. So I have sort of two questions on that. One, is that timescale the timescale for exploring the opportunity or for delivering the project? And the second being, by short and medium, what does that actually look like in years? I know that in Appendix 5 in the action plan, there's sort of delivery on plane pictures, but the skate park in Kennington isn't covered by that because it's not a plane pitch, it's a skate park. So I was just wondering if I could get a bit of clarity on those.
I think Tom's probably best to translate the officer terminology there. That's what the team worked in.
So the short term would be 1 to 3 years, which is an ongoing and very important need which needs to be addressed now. Medium term would be 3 to 8 years, which is important to be addressed and planned for in council decision making and policy. So 3 to 8 year window. And sorry, Councillor, of course, you had
it's just whether the timescale is to explore the opportunity or to actually deliver on the project.
It will be delivered.
Okay. Just wanted to. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any more questions, or should we move to playing pitches? Let's move to playing pitches. Okay. We've covered quite a lot. So, are there any specific questions or comments related to the playing pitches? And obviously, we've heard from Councillor McCarthy on specific issues related to growth.
I suppose perhaps to expand that, for a start, I'm not quite sure what 0.5 of a 3G pitch is. I mean, half pitch doesn't seem very sensible to me.
Thank you, Councillor. So this would be, is this in relation to one of the strategic development sites? I think it's in most instances where we're referring to half of a pitch.
Yeah, page 145 was the particular paragraph I'm looking at. Right, 0.5 times additional full-size sportlit 3G pitch. It says it several other places. It just happens to be that.
So I think in most instances, this would be where a development generates a population that puts pressure on facilities, but not enough for a whole pitch. But we don't want to let half provision escape us in terms of collecting contributions. So as I understand, it will be for contributions from a development that are generating the need for about half of a pitch. In terms of delivery, it could be that if it's half of an additional full size pitch, it could be from a junior pitch. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to come in on that point. I don't think they will, but as I understand, it's either from developer contributions or for a pitch which isn't for a full size 11v11 adult pitch.
Yes, I'd be much happier if it didn't say 0.5 there and said an additional full size 3G pitch. But yes, I take your point and explain that then.
Might be a bit of overlap with the last one, I'm sorry. So as it relates to Councillor Batstone's point about contributions and like getting enough to make a whole thing, and what strikes me looking at this is what is like a critical mass that you need to get a large facility, because something like Valley Park, which is specifically mentioned in the strategy here, it's huge. It's 4,000 homes, and yet it doesn't warrant its own leisure centre, which says to me there'll never be a new leisure centre, which is surprising to me. So how does that, or is there a situation in which, like you just explained to Councillor Batstone about half a pitch, that we will at some point get enough money to warrant building a new leisure facility?
If you like to explain about how it adds up, yeah.
So when the consultants, Stuart Todd Associates, started working on this project, one of the first things they did was to survey existing clubs and facilities to understand what their capacity is. So in the Didcot area, they've been looking at the capacity of the existing leisure centres, and then seeing, okay, how much of, but when you add in the projected population growth from the new housing, does that put any of the existing leisure facilities over capacity? If it does, can that be remedied through enhancements to existing facilities to improve the facility offer or the opening hours, for example, because that's more economical, environmentally and financially, building a new centre. So for the Valley Park site, they found there was sufficient capacity in the Didcot area, with the new provision for, I think there's a new sports hall going on the Didcot North East development in South Oxfordshire, not a leisure centre, just a sports hall with the courts. So there was sufficient provision there. And so that's how the assessment was done. It looked at the capacity of existing facilities, not just a purely what does this population generate on its own. And it would be the same for the pitches as well, in terms of looking at the existing capacity in the area. What are the clubs saying their capacity is, what is, and then adding that to the population forecast to understand what is the net additional need. Because we want to be in a position where we're able to defend the asks at planning application stage, because we are challenged by planning applicants who rightly so are scrutinising what we are suggesting is needed to mitigate the impact of development. And if there's a leisure centre that has capacity to accommodate that population growth, then the developer will be saying, well, we'll make a contribution to improvement to facilities there, but we are not paying for a new leisure centre because that's not needed, and therefore falls foul of regulation 123 of the community infrastructure levy regulations. I want to say 2010. So yeah, it has to be in line with those strict regulations from government in terms of what we can seek contributions for.
Okay. But it just seems surprising to me, but I'll take your word for it and your knowledge that and these government regulations and so on, all these calculations are taking place. It just seems surprising where I lived that would be the point. But my separate question is around muggers, which are mentioned a lot in this report. But specifically, there's one happens to be in my patch at Boundary Park, and it's mentioned a few times that it's below the standard and so on. Seems that's another surprising thing because it is brand new. So yeah, I live on Great Western Park. I can virtually see the facility from my home. Yes, it's a new estate, so I'm just surprised that when there are facilities in our district that don't meet the standard that are brand new, and it's just a bit of a cause for concern going forward as we build out more homes, new facilities, and so on.
So thank you. Sorry,
So I was going to say, I'd share your concern about any new facilities that aren't up to scratch. It's very much part of what this study's about, is making sure that current stock don't fall below the standards. And I know that the national sporting bodies do regularly review their standards, and what would meet muster even only 2 or 3 years ago may no longer meet the but part of the enhanced strand of this work is to make sure that things are brought up to the level that they are what the national sporting bodies would expect. Tom, do you want to add anything on that?
Sorry, yes. So I think the strategy recognises an overplay on the Muga there. So it could be that it's sort of reached capacity quite quickly, or it could be that it's not maintained, but it sounds to me, Councillor Gaston, what you're saying, it does look quite new and shiny still.
Well, I don't know. I've actually heard from Boundary Parks that it's not quite up to, like, it does seem that wear and tear quite quickly. Yeah, which I guess explains what's, but it's just surprising, like, what have the developers done where they've not managed to produce something that meets the sense? But I guess we have other mechanisms for ensuring that.
Yes, I mean they do give us commuted sums to maintain the facilities, but agree with what Councillor Falsham was saying in terms of it should be to a high standard.
Yeah.
And we will rely on partners at Sport England for their standards in terms of what they recommend for playing sport equipment for mothers.
think we're going to move. We need to move to our discussion fairly quickly and to thinking about our recommendations that we want to make to cabinet.
One point that hadn't come up.
Sorry, Judy, go
on the pitches. I mean, there are a huge number all over the area, and certainly the smaller ones do tend to struggle with maintenance. And I couldn't really find anything about any coordinated approach to how we can assist, or clearly each pitch needs to be maintained in a different way depending on what sport is being played on it. But I'm wondering why we don't seem to have any approach to that, because that would actually, we can bulk buy, or we can provide facilities or be an enabler to being able to get maintenance done to these pitches. It is usually the one thing that they will struggle with to find enough money to do, on top of just providing the sport. So I wondered why we haven't got anything about maintenance in here to try and encourage people to maintain them and to help with that.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. I think that's more of a question for the our technical services team, the parks team, for pitches that are owned by the Vale, owners that have pitches that are part of this strategy obviously have their own maintenance standards, and as Tom has just mentioned, where stuff is being provided as a result of Section 106 agreements, there's clearly something involved that be forward for continued maintenance that would be undertaken on the schedules that are set out. But yeah, it's not addressed specifically, but I think it's probably more a question for me. Tom's got a further point to bring in here.
Sorry to interject, Councillor. On page 7 of the playing pitch strategy is a recommendation to maintain and improve the quality of all grass pitches and artificial grass pitches. So I'll just get the page reference for you for that for the report bundle. Page 102 of your report bundle. Yeah, they're hidden behind the big numbers, aren't they? Sorry, Councillor Roberts.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to move to discussion now as to what value can we add as scrutiny committee to this report at this point. But I do want to just come back to our speakers before we do that, because I think what these reports do is they talk about what we can provide, whether it's 0.5 of a pitch or a substandard pitch, or what are we providing through the planning process. And the bottom line, it is mentioned on page 86, is the bottom line is to avoid a loss of facilities. But I think what we're hearing is actually this strategy, because it focuses so closely on the planning process, it actually can't stop us losing facilities. And we've talked about community use agreements and things like that. So is there anything that this strategy can do to help Cabinet look at Harcourt Hill? Is there anything that we can do tonight to this strategy to help that process, or to ensure that this strategy is not an impediment to Cabinet looking? But I also want to, as a bit of a kind of meta thing really, but actually what Grove are talking about is a loss of opportunity. We're not losing any facilities in Grove, but by not making them better, we have substandard pitches, and we also have an issue in Milton with a blockage in the planning system. We are going to lose clubs, and we're going to lose opportunities for girls to start new groups. With the number of clubs that we hear are trying to use Grove. So how can we use this? How does this strategy help us deal with the loss of opportunity, the loss of teams, which is not counted in bricks and tiles and rubber surfaces?
Thank you, Chair. Addressing the Harcourt Hill question first, because that's one that I know has loomed large on everybody's mind tonight. There are really two strands of what we can do as a council beyond just this committee. As a council, there are two key things that we can commit to. One is to keep swimming pool provision and in our strategy because it shows that it's needed. To say, yes, we can acknowledge in our written update that it has, since the report's written, has closed. We'll say it's still there. We still see that need because that will make it much harder for any developer to say, not needed, we can just build over that. The other strand is within the wider dry local plan to keep that land allocated for leisure. It's there. It's clearly set out as it's leisure to be provided on this area. Doing that is the best safeguard we can put in at this stage. I did a bit of research over the weekend. I looked at the cost of swimming pools and leisure centres. The cost of construction of these facilities in particular has snowballed within the last year, particularly post-COVID. I saw reports of Hartlepool's new Highlight Leisure Centre, where the cost has gone up by £9 million from 25 to 34 million. The Epping Leisure Centre's costs have risen to over 30 million. Newcastle City Council just have to fund another 4 million to complete a leisure centre that they were building. And South Ayrshire is going to require another 7 million. Those are very significant sums. We can't just, if you are sitting on £20 million down the back of your sofa, please do tell us, because I'm sure it's very uncomfortable for anybody sitting on that sofa at the time. I don't think we can find.
With respect, I don't think that's what we're asking. We're asking what we are being asked as a committee is to. This is the last opportunity we have to.
Well, like
look at the strategy. Is how is there anything? And what I'm asking as chair is there anything we can do tonight? And I accept that you've committed to updating. I guess I'm kind of opening the discussion is one to our recommendations is that we are asking for errors to be corrected, and you're saying that you'll provide an update, and I think we're asking for the report that is dated September 2024 to reflect the situation in 2024, not the April version.
I think a rewrite is not what we were talking about.
I think what the scope that we have, bearing in mind that the deadline for cabinet papers will be in a couple of weeks' time, and the same team of officers working on this are the same officers working on the joint local plan. So we do need to be mindful of the resources of the team being sort of diverted between the two of those projects. I think it's unfair to say that some of the information was dated back from April because we did have a look at the assessment and have a look at the consultation responses, and we have updated it.
Yeah, no, sorry, I
based on that from it probably been late August, early September by the time the draft reports came into us. Having said that, and obviously it's not my position to ask the committee for specific items. Where we would find as officers would be most valuable, where there's errors, like factual errors, but we can update in terms of, where we've talked about Harcourt Hill Pool is to say, adding in comma and the pool closed in September 2024 to update that change in scenario or to clarify the position that's perhaps not coming through so clearly in the report at the moment. So changes like that for us, I think, would be most useful going forward to cabinet. Although ultimately it's your decision as members as to what you want to recommend. So thank you.
Yes, those sorts of clarifications would be highly useful. What I was trying to avoid was a wholesale rewrite because there's not either the time or the capacity at this stage to do something like that.
Yeah, no, and I don't think anyone in this room has asked or suggested anywhere near a wholesale. I think that is that specific example, but I think the point was being made is that actually it's such an important for thousands and thousands of people. So I think it is for that whole sub area, Harcourt Hill, which is why it's worth. Okay, so committee, in terms of recommendations to cabinet, I think I
I think there's a few issues that have come up repeatedly during the evening, and I'm very happy to help flesh these out. I think there's concern that there's a conceptual issue that's perhaps driven by the way Sport England does things regarding the 20-minute driving that does contradict our corporate plan emphasis, and we are concerned about that and disappointed by that. That perhaps this is something that can be taken up with Sport England over the next couple of years. I think this is where perhaps we have a lobbying opportunity to say to Sport England, actually, your conceptual thing needs to change, but I'm happy to take. So I think that there's the issue around the active travel, how important it is to all of us, and I think you guys have clearly see that as well. And there's a concern about how do we keep this updated, and how do we have a system that tracks changes, what's been done, what's been protected, what's been enhanced. This question of the snapshot to reflect the situation in September 2024 and the specific clarifications regarding Harcourt Hill, I think we dealt with, and we can ask that those specific clarifications are made, and I think we've had that long discussion. Are there other? I guess I would want to really express my disappointment that yet again we are being asked to add value to a document to which we can't add value because it's too late. And this is a problem. We should have perhaps had this document 6 months ago, because we're being told there's nothing can change because it's too late, and that's disappointing. Yeah. So what we then have to do is ask for the next iteration to take into account the points we make.
Yes, I can share your frustrations on that if you allow me to put in a couple of points. I share your frustrations. This report took some time to come to us. I remember pushing very hard to get sight of it before it went out for consultation. I know there were some delays in the production process, and that was regrettable. We've ended up with shortened deadlines because of submitting the joint local plan this December. I'd love to have this level of scrutiny, and the more eyes on a report, the better, because we get a better report at the end of the day because of it. So yes, I appreciate it would have been better to come at a stage where there was more that could be added.
Okay, I'd like the committee. Yeah, thank you. I'd like the committee to flesh out our recommendations because it's 9:10. Debbie, did you want to come in on our recommendations or?
Yeah, I have one that I think hasn't been mentioned. I remember Andy's explaining that we didn't have to go out to consultation on this leisure strategy, but that we did in pursuit of our intention to be transparent and open. But my reaction to that was two things. If the data gathering had been more robust, then it wouldn't have needed to go out to consultation. As it was, the consultation caught some of the errors, factual errors, that should not have happened, in my opinion. So it was valuable in that regard, and maybe we need to up our game in terms of how we gather factual information for strategic studies such as this. The other thing I thought of is, and I would recommend that any department or team or group doing such strategic studies should ask the local members for their input. Everything we've talked about tonight could have been avoided had they just asked local members about what's going on in terms of playing pitch or leisure facility provision in their patch, because we know, but nobody asked us. So I think that could be a recommendation to Cabinet that all such projects, I know we have a corporate delivery framework and a project management thing, and maybe this needs to be added in as a particular step in every project. Do we have the right people involved, and how can local members add to our knowledge and understanding of the problem? Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Yeah.
I support what Councillor Hallett says. I just wanted to add also to what you were saying about active travel. And That for me, and other people have already said it, so there's no need to go over it, but that was one of the key things I also pulled out when I was reading this paper. And I obviously hadn't appreciated that it comes from Sport England, and so that is important context, and I do think there's a lobbying opportunity. But I don't think that means we shouldn't mention it at all in the report. Obviously, we can't go away and measure all the cycling distances and stuff like that. But there's at multiple points in this document, it says about our commitment to climate. And it's just so stark to me that it says that. And then a few pages later, it just always talks about driving. So I just think there needs to be, I would really like to see some acknowledgement, but understanding that we can't go away and do all the calculations. And I'm not asking for that. Yeah.
Chair, may I throw something in very quickly?
I think probably we'd need to just let the committee come to our conclusions, I think.
Perhaps I
But it's something I want you to consider for your conclusions about,
Very quickly then.
about where legal entity around the S106 agreement. The agreement for the 106, I understand, would be between the council and the contractor building.
Yeah, I think we've already been told we can't get into the detail of, I think this is a legal question.
Yeah, but can that be considered? Because as Councillor Roberts said earlier, if someone else, if the builder builds it, but they then pass it on to someone else, can that agreement be passed on?
That's not a question, I'm afraid, that we can really deal with in the, sorry, but it's not relevant to this discussion. It's a very important point, but it's not relevant.
Well, just because you discussed it, I thought maybe, the builder goes away, but
Yes, I think we've had a comment from Councillor Call, who's a cabinet member, saying all members were made aware of the consultation process, and so they could easily have included areas they thought might have been missing at that point. I think that's probably a fair point, that we can contribute to the consultation process, and certainly I did at great length. So yes, I think that's important. It's important to take that point from Councillor Call. Thank you, Sue. Are there recommendations we would like specifically to make to Cabinet?
I don't know about how, well, presumably there will be sort of an action plan following on from this. I would like to see in that action plan about an estimate of how many community agreements have actually been achieved with the various things. Because although we're talking about going forward, putting them in, it also mentions about trying to achieve as many with existing facilities as well. That's correct, isn't it? Or isn't it?
I'm very pleased to hear suggestions as to additional reporting that we can give, particularly those that are very quantitative and can be ascertained quite easily. So thank you for that suggestion.
So I think specifically then we can ask that we were particularly keen that community use agreements are a lever that the district council can use, and we'd like further reporting on
somehow
that.
there's feedback that our success in that area
should be able to be
somewhere that's accessible to the committee.
Should be able to be brought in under council plan reporting.
Any other points?
I don't know how we put it in the report or recommendations, but it's obvious that there's a lot of unhappiness in Grove, and I noticed that lots of the comments made from Grove, which just said the comments are noted. So I'm not sure how we as a committee can perhaps convey that to Cabinet, although I'm sure other routes will convey it to Cabinet. But I think, yes, it does come back to this community agreements. Maybe the key, maybe the answer to the issue, at least some of the issues have been raised by the Grove residents.
I think perhaps
because the current strategy does seem to give them limited access to the community facilities proposed.
Yeah.
So that I'm happy with that.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not sure how.
Yes, I think what we're kind of getting to is that the community use agreements seem to be a major key, and in lots of we need to use this strategy to be much more proactive in making sure that those things exist, because there's clearly many that aren't in place, and even if it takes pressure off existing facilities by providing. So, okay.
I'd certainly see community use agreements as being a key way of delivering stuff, and the firmer commitments we can get, the better. Really.
Okay. Okay, so I have a concern around conceptual issue, and that's a conflict between Sports England priorities and our own priorities regarding active travel and driving, and that we Cabinet please could use that as a lobbying opportunity with Sport England. How can we do this better in future? We would like Cabinet and officers to work together to make the specific additions related to Harcourt Hill. We would like Cabinet to really work with officers to look at community use agreements as the kind of key element, and as a lever that district council can use, and to make sure that there's robust reporting on that progress. Yeah.
The other one from two others you just want to consider. There was the one from Councillor Hallett around asking Cabinet members to review the process for data gathering and the engagement of local councillors.
And that can also include scrutiny when and again it's this question of when does this stuff come to scrutiny, because when can we add value, because we could have all added value 6 months ago.
Yeah. And then there was the other point that committee raised around how strategy or the developing action plans are updated and changes are tracked. So committee may wish to make a recommendation about the visibility of the IDP and the action plan, and whether that's something that you wish to come back here. Is that mechanism?
Yes.
Which links back to Judy's point around seeing the number of community use agreements from now to in the future at some point.
Okay. So yes, a question of bringing this back. How is this strategy working? Once it starts to settle down. Are we seeing clear improvement specifically in S106?
I think that's 5. Is that 6? Adida?
I've got 6 here. Yeah, but you've covered the ones that I've noted down as well, Adriana.
Everyone's looking quite glazed. That's been quite an item, I think possibly our longest item. I knew there was going to be lots of interest in these items. There has been for a long time, and they're really vital to our residents and to us. So thank you for your team, all your time. Yeah. So committee, are we happy to make those 6 recommendations to Cabinet?
Yes.
Yeah. Which are kind of to be continued as much as anything. But
I think, yeah, presumably when the action plan comes out, we can have a look at it. But I think this is an area where we know updating has been at fault in the past.
Yeah.
And we like it not to be so in the future.
Yeah. So it's tracking changes and tracking successes as well as yeah. All right. Am I able to draw this meeting to a close? Yes. Once I thank everybody. Does anybody have anything else to say? I particularly want to thank our public speakers this evening for bearing with us and for your input to this. Certainly, I think what you've really highlighted are the pressures on these facilities and the areas and the issues that we have in the district. So yes, I hope Cabinet will use this document to take these developments forward. Okay, I'm going to close that meeting now. We can stop recording. Thank you ever so much, everybody.